Okay, tell me if the whiteboard is visible to you all. Okay. So to begin with, first of all, as I said, we are starting with the second unit, that is syntax analysis. Okay. So before we begin with the prerequisite, as I mentioned, which is context-free grammar, we'll just have just a quick glance of what exactly are we doing ahead further in this particular unit. Okay. So yeah. So now, as I said, that we are please have patience. I think again there's some problem. Is it visible whatever I'm writing here? There is some problem with the calibration of the device. I've shared the whiteboard screen again. Please, I'll write something on the board. Please let me know if it's working or not, okay? Because on my side it's showing that it's writing, but still. Guys, can you all see the whiteboard? Okay, yeah. We are good to go now. Without delaying further, we'll start. Okay. So in second unit, we'll be doing syntax analysis. Now, syntax analysis means what? First, we'll just take a brief look at that, and then we'll go to the prerequisite that is required. Okay. So till now, what we learned was we have our source program. Okay. This is given to the first stage, that is lexical analysis. What lexical analysis is doing is it is generating tokens and that is giving it to the next phase. Okay. So lexical analysis, instead of calling it as lexical analysis, we can just call it as lexical analyzer. Okay. The entity which is responsible for converting source program into token is a lexical analyzer. Similarly, the token which is generated has to go to the next phase, which is syntax analysis, in which the entity which is supposed to process these stream of tokens is called as a parser, okay, or syntax analyzer. So this figure we had already seen. Token is given to the parser. It will construct the parse tree accordingly, and it will ask for more tokens. Correct. This process continues, and for that it refers to the symbol table and all that we have already seen. Okay. So what does this parser do? That is what we need to understand. So what parser does is it does, broadly speaking, it does syntax analysis. So when you say syntax analysis, means what it needs is it needs certain rules to be checked. So suppose if I write a statement like say x equal to y plus z semicolon. Now we know that this is a valid C statement. We are considering C programming language. Okay, so we know that this is a valid C statement, assuming that all these variables have already been declared. Okay. Now, having understood this, that it is a valid statement, because we know that we know C language, that's the reason we can easily say that it is a valid statement. But how does the parser do this? So that means the parser will refer, or it has to refer to certain set of rules based on which it will say that this particular statement after parsing it is correct. Correct. So for that it requires certain rules. Now, in order to understand those rules, what we need to understand is the context-free grammar. Okay, that's why the grammar of the programming language comes into picture. It's as simple as the example which I had already taken in the class, in the initial classes wherein we discussed about phases of compilation in general. Like for example, suppose if I said that if I want to ask you, say, how are you? This is what I'll be probably typing in the chat box over here, or I'll be asking you directly, how are you? Correct. Instead, suppose if I just type something like you how are, okay, then this is definitely not something correct, because there is some way in which a sentence needs to be formed. That is, first this particular word, then this particular word, and then this particular word. Okay, if we just jumble them up and we form another sentence, of course this can be called a sentence because it is a sequence of words. Okay, it's a multi-word statement, so it can be called as an English sentence, but it's not a valid English statement, right? So why we call it it's not valid? Because it does not follow the rules of the English language as it is defined. If had it been defined this way only, we were taught like this, then probably it could have been called as valid statement. Okay. So similarly, in order for a parser to decide that this particular statement which I have written here is a valid statement or not, it needs to follow certain rules. Okay, so that's where, as I said, the context-free grammar comes into picture. So let's begin with the context-free grammar. Okay, so to start with, as I said, we'll start with context-free grammar. It is called as CFG. I believe all of you know this. I believe you all must have referred to it as CFG only all the time. So now what the CFG is, that's what we'll try to understand. So the CFG can be formally defined as a quadruple. Okay. So when we say that a CFG can be formally defined as a quadruple, it means basically quadruple is something, or it's a structure which is having 4 fields. Okay. So that's the reason it is called as quadruple. Fine. So now this quadruple, as I said, it is defined as a quadruple. It can be defined as, so it will be called as G. G stands for grammar over here. So G can be defined as a set of, or a quadruple which consists of these fields: V, capital T, capital P, and capital S. Okay. So now here each of these, that is V, T, P, and S, define something. Okay. So V is nothing but it is a finite set of variables. Okay. And alternatively, or in the most common term, it is called as non-terminals. Then T is a finite set of terminal symbols. Okay. Now, next is P. P is set of production rules. So these are the production rules which actually define the grammar, or they form the grammar, based on which the parser is supposed to determine whether whatever is given to it is correct or not. Okay. And S is the start symbol. Okay. And this S is always a part of V, which is set of variables. Okay. Now one thing before we go further ahead, what I would like to tell you all over here is, when we say that T is a finite set of terminals and V is a finite set of variables, that means both of them should be unique. Okay, which implies that the intersection of V and T should be empty. Okay, so if you take these two sets, that is V as one set in terms of set theory, which I believe you have studied in discrete mathematics. If you consider V as one set, T as another set, then the intersection of this should be empty. Okay, so there cannot be any common symbols between these two sets. Okay, so this is just a formal definition of what context-free grammar is. Going further ahead with some notational conventions. This is important because further ahead, especially in this particular unit and maybe in the remaining units as well, we'll need this specifically in this unit. So I'll just give you all notational conventions for the two major things that we'll be always using. One thing is the terminals, and the second one is non-terminals. Okay, so first we'll take the notational convention for terminals. Now when we say notational convention for terminals means, suppose if you are given a grammar, we should be able to know that so and so symbol is a terminal and so and so symbol is a non-terminal. So in order to distinguish between them, there are certain conventions that are to be followed. Okay, so I'll just write here in short. The first convention that is followed is lowercase letters. Okay, and lowercase letters especially, now when we say lowercase letters, we are obviously considering the English language. In English language, what we have is the alphabets from A to Z. And in this A to Z, specifically or most commonly, the lowercase letters which are most often used are A, B, C. Okay, I'm not saying that we are limited to use only A, B, C, but it is a usual practice which is followed of using lowercase ABC. The other convention is that operator symbols or the different operators. Now the different operators will be something like plus or maybe multiplication, that is asterisk, and so on. Okay, various other operators. The next thing is punctuation symbols or punctuation operators. These are also called as terminals or considered as terminals. So punctuation could be something like parenthesis, then commas, etc. Okay. Next is digits, most importantly. So the digits from 0 to 9, they are also considered to be terminals. And additionally, in certain grammars, like for example, grammars which involve keywords of the language, or maybe certain, I should say, sequence of characters, that is strings, they are also considered to be terminals. Okay, so we just call them as boldface. So boldface strings, such as, just as an example, so I'm just writing this slightly broad so that we'll just get to, I'm calling it as boldface. So something like this, or something like, suppose if you're using any of the constructs of the language, something like this. Okay, so I've just darkened these particular two words, ID or IF. So each of them also called as terminals. Okay. The next thing is about non-terminals. So non-terminals means the variables. Okay. So in non-terminals, the first convention is about uppercase letters. Again, uppercase letters also early in the alphabet. When I say early in the alphabet, means something like say A, B, C, and so on, but not limited to only these. The next thing is S. Okay. Now specifically about S, S is usually used. Okay, I won't use this arrow because it will create confusion. S is usually used as a start symbol. Then the third convention could be something like lowercase italic names. Lowercase italic names means actually lowercase names in the italics font. Okay, so something like EXPR or STMT statement, something like this. This can be considered as non-terminals. And other thing is like, for example, for programming constructs, like suppose if you want to discuss certain programming constructs, uppercase letters can be used. Okay. Now, when I say programming constructs, in order to represent programming constructs means in programming constructs, we have something like expressions, we have term, or we have factor. Okay. So instead of writing expression as a whole in that entire grammar, okay, because repeatedly we'll have to write, what we can do is we can use E for it. Or maybe if you want to write some, this will be more clear when we'll take up an example. For term, you can use T. If there is some factor in an expression, then you can use it as use F. Okay. So these are just those basic notational conventions which are used in case of a context-free grammar. So I believe up till here everything should be fine. Okay, so let's go ahead. The next thing is we'll just take some example and begin with CFG. Okay, let's take one example. Say, consider the language L equal to A raised to N, B raised to N. Okay, where N is greater than equal to 1. So we are given that the language is so and so, that is it is A raised to N, B raised to N. Now what does this imply is that this language, okay, basically this language will be consisting strings with this particular combination. So A raised to N, B raised to N. So now in that case, what it means is, if I take the value of N, just for example, N equal to 2, it will be A raised to 2, B raised to 2, okay, which is further nothing but A, B, B, okay, because this will be defining the number of symbols. It's not like we have to write, we don't have to write A into A or something like that. It is the number of occurrences of that particular symbol. So 2 A's followed by 2 B's. If it was A raised to 3, B raised to 3, it would have been triple A, triple B, and so on. Okay, so we are told that we are given this particular language. Okay, so if this particular language is given to us, what we need to first of all understand, we need to do is we need to write the CFG for this. Okay, so when we need to write the CFG for this, we need to write the grammar for this. What a grammar involves is set of terminals, set of non-terminals, production rules, and a start symbol. This is what we need to do for this particular language that is given to us. Okay. Now, looking at this particular language that is given to us, first of all, what we need to know is, whenever a language is given to us, something like this, it is clear that whatever is given in that, they will be the terminals. Okay. The strings will be made up of only terminals and not non-terminals. This N is nothing but it is just the power. It is just telling the number of occurrences of each of the terminals. So the language is consisting of the two symbols A and B. Okay. So what we can do is we can define T. So T is nothing but it is a set of just two symbols A and B. Okay. Now next thing is right now over here, as per whatever we can whatever is given to us, what we can understand here is our set of variables or set of non-terminals is just consisting of one non-terminal, that is S, capital S, okay, which is a start symbol. Because as I mentioned earlier also, start symbol is also a part of the set of variables. Okay, so what we have done over here is we have done this, we have done this, and of course start symbol is given to us. So now what we need to do is we need to define the production rules. So production rules need to be defined. Now the production rules that we need to define here should be such that they'll be allowing us to generate strings of this particular type: A, B, 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 A, B, B, or just AB, and similar. Okay, so that's what we need to do here. So how do we go about it? Right? So we can write T equal to, say, since it is a set of production rules, that's the reason I'm taking this curly brace. So what we can do here is we can write S gives, or S goes to A, S, B. Okay, this is one production rule that I'm defining, and the other production rule I'm defining here is S gives A, B. So now how do I understand or how do I know that I need to define these two production rules? For that, what I should understand is which are the possible strings from this particular for this particular language. As I said, we can have the smallest string, that is AB, because n is greater than equal to 1. The smallest value of n is 1, so a raised to 1, b raised to 1 gives us this. Okay, so n equal to 1. If I put n equal to 2, it will be a b b. If I put n equal to 3, it will be a b b b. Okay, and so on. So that means I need to write a grammar which will allow us to generate all these strings for the given language. So one production rule what I wrote here is S gives A S B. Now this becomes a recursive rule, okay, because this S again appears here, and then I'm defining this S in terms of just AB. So now if I consider this particular production rules, and if I try to write it, so if I start with S gives us ASB. Okay. Now in the next step, what if I do is if I replace this again by ASB as it is with the earlier A and B as it is. Okay. And this is one thing. I'll write this in another A, B. These are the earlier ones. Okay. Further, what I'm doing here is I'm again defining this as A S B with the earlier A as it is, the first A as it is, and this. Okay. And of course, this will continue. We don't want it to just continue. What I can do here is I can now use the second production rule. And I'm using the second production rule. What I can do here is I can replace this S by AB, okay, with the earlier ones. That is, there are three A's, so A, and then there are three B's, B, B, B. Okay, so this is a string that can be derived. So if you go to see, this is A raised to 4, B raised to 4. Okay, I believe this should be clear to you all. Fine. So now if I want to write the grammar, what my grammar is having is all this. This is the set of terminals, this is a set of non-terminals. Only one non-terminal is there. There's a start symbol is, and the production rule is set of production rules is this. Okay. So let's take another example. Let's say that we have to consider the language L equal to 0 raised to n, 1 raised to n, such that n is greater than equal to 1. Can you tell me the solution to this? Can you give me the answer quickly? S gives 0 S1, S gives 0 1. Okay. Anyone else? So now whatever Rahul has said over here, that is S gives 0 S1 and S gives 0 1 are the production rules for the grammar for this particular language that is given to us. Okay, so that is about what is context free grammar. Okay, So we'll go ahead. So having known what is context-free grammar, next thing what we need to understand is where it can be used or how it can be used. Okay. So the next topic in this particular part is derivations. Okay. So now derivation means something like, as I considered that S is a start symbol. Okay. Right. So when I say S is a start symbol means it will be the symbol on the left hand side of a production. Okay. Okay. Before we go to the derivation, okay, one thing I'll just clear at this point itself. Please remember that a CIFG consists of all those four entities which I mentioned. That is set of finite set of variables, finite set of terminals, a start symbol, and a set of production rules. Now, set of production rules means there can be multiple production rules in that particular set. So if I consider one particular production, that production should be of the form alpha goes to or alpha gives beta. Okay, this is just a generalized form, a general definition of the production rule, where our alpha has to be one variable or one non-terminal. Okay, and beta could be a combination of V and T, or it could also be empty. So when I'm saying combination of V and T means it could have a sequence of variables and followed by terminals, or terminals followed by variables, or it could also be just an epsilon. So this is the basic thing that is required to be clearly understood. Okay. So having understood that, we'll go back to derivations. So we consider that S is a start symbol. So when we talk about derivations, what we need to understand is it is nothing but it is generation of string from S. This is the simplest way in which you can define what is a derivation. Now, for constructing this derivation, there are 2 points that we need to consider. The first thing is the choice of non-terminal. And the second point to be considered. Now, whenever we want to construct derivations, this is the first point that we need to consider, that is choice of non-terminal. I'll come to this with an example. And the second one is the choice of production rule. And why I'm saying choice of production rule is because there can be multiple production rules. So out of that, we should be able to choose one particular production rule for corresponding non-terminal. This is very important. So please remember these 2 points. Whenever we have to construct a derivation, these are 2 points which we need to understand very clearly. Which is the non-terminal, that is the choice of non-terminal, and the next is choice of production for corresponding non-terminal. Okay, so we'll take some example and then we'll understand this more clearly. I might take additional 5 minutes or so, so please have patience. So before we try to elaborate these 2 points with example, what we need to understand is that there are 2 types of derivations. Okay, the first type is called as LMD. Okay, LMD stands for leftmost derivation. So LMD, and the second one is called as RMD. So it is rightmost derivation. Okay, R, M, and D. So LMD and RMD are the two ways in which we can, or the two uh, variations or two types of derivations that we can have. So first we'll go to LMD, that is leftmost derivation. Now leftmost derivation means, one way of defining or formally defining leftmost derivation is in this manner: alpha and this symbol or this operator is beta, and this particular symbol is labeled with LM, which defines that it is a leftmost derivation. So leftmost derivation is something wherein, given a particular production rule, what we do is we start replacing the leftmost symbol or the leftmost variable of that particular production with some other production. Just to tell you all in short, suppose if I have, or just to take an example, suppose if I have S derives A, B, and also I have S derives A and S derives B. Suppose if I have this particular gram, and suppose if I want to generate a string as something like, say, A, one second, I just need to do this change. This will be A gives A and B gives B. Suppose if I want to generate a string like B, okay. Then in this case, and if I want to do a leftmost derivation, what I'll do is I'll have to consider this particular production rule. So I consider S derives AB. Okay. Now in this we can see that there are two symbols, that is there are two non-terminals or two variables. Okay, that is, this is first and this is second. So if you scan this production from left to right, then on the right hand side, okay, specifically on the right hand side, to tell you all, we need to look out for the first non-terminal, and that needs to be replaced by some appropriate production from the available production rules. Okay, so now S derives this, and I want to generate this particular string. So I need to look at what can be replaced. I'll just take one more value over here. Suppose if I take this as epsilon. So now I need to see which production can I use. So what I can use here is, what I want in the string is A followed by A and then B. That means I can use this one. So it will become A followed by A and then B. Now the leftmost non-terminal that is remaining here is this B. Okay, so what I write here is LM A, B can be replaced by this B. That means this particular string can be generated. So that is about leftmost derivation. On the other hand, suppose if I consider the rightmost derivation, in case of rightmost derivation, I'll try to take the same example, A, B. Okay. Suppose in case of rightmost derivation, we choose the rightmost symbol and start substitution from the rightmost non-terminal. So in this case, we'll be considering B. So what we'll do is A, and as per this production rule, B will be giving us the small b. Okay. So what we did was we replaced this one. Next, we can see that the next rightmost non-terminal that we have over here is A. So again, look in the set of production rules that you have and replace it by the appropriate one. So A, B. So we can see that the string can be generated using this particular rightmost derivation also. Okay. So I think We'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow in the class. Please see that you're aware of whatever has been covered in today's class, because tomorrow again I won't be repeating in the offline class whatever is done today. Before we stop, please quickly answer your attendance. Roll number 1. Roll number 1 absent. Okay. Then roll number 2. Absent. 3 absent. Okay, present. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, absent. 10, present. Okay, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16 absent. Okay, present. Mohit, 17, 17 absent. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 29, 30, 30, okay, 31, 32, 32 absent, 33, 33 absent, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 39, 40, 41, 42, 42, absent, 43, 43, 44, 44, 46, 46, 47, 47, 48, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 56, 57,